Victoria smelled vodka. Then she felt heat. Flames raced up her pregnant belly as 300 people watched in horror. Her husband stood frozen. His mistress smiled. And in that moment, Victoria realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. 1 hour earlier, Victoria had walked into her father's ballroom wearing an ivory gown and carrying her 7-month-old baby. She thought she was attending a charity gala. She had no idea her husband had paid his pregnant mistress $50,000 to kill her. No idea he'd increased her life insurance to $5 million. No idea he'd planned every detail of her death. But Victoria survived. And what she discovered next would send shockwaves through Manhattan's elite society and put the man she loved behind bars for 25 years. This is the true story of betrayal, fire, and one woman's fight for justice. Stay with me, because what happened next will leave you speechless. Victoria smelled it before she felt it. Champagne. No, not champagne. Alcohol, the sharp, chemical bite of vodka splashing across silk. Then heat. Sudden, terrifying heat climbing her pregnant belly. Orange flames raced up the ivory fabric of her maternity gown. The crowd gasped. A woman screamed. Victoria's own scream tore from her throat as her hands flew to cover her stomach. Her baby. God, her baby. Get back! Her father's voice cut through the case. Strong arms tackled her. Marcus, her father's security chief, rolled her across the marble floor of the Hayes Grand Ballroom. His jacket smothered the flames. White foam from a fire extinguisher covered them both. Victoria couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Her hands pressed against her belly, feeling for movement. Please, please kick. Please be okay. The baby kicked. Hard. Victoria sobbed with relief. Sirens wailed outside. The elegant charity gala had become a crime scene. 300 guests stood frozen, phones raised, capturing everything. But let's go back. 3 hours earlier, before the fire, before everything changed. Victoria Hayes Sterling stood before her bedroom mirror, smoothing the ivory silk over her 7-month pregnant belly. The maternity gown was custom designed by Sophie, her best friend. Elegant, sophisticated, appropriate for the Sterling Foundation gala her family hosted every year. Her phone sat on the dresser, silent. She picked it up, checked for messages from Harrison. Nothing. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. Her thumb moved automatically. The ritual of a wife seeking reassurance that never came. Stop it, she whispered to herself. He's just busy preparing for tonight. But her stomach twisted. Not from the baby. From something else. Something she couldn't name. Or wouldn't. A knock on the door made her drop the phone. Victoria, dear. Margaret Sterling's voice carried that particular tone. The one that said criticism was coming. May I come in? Victoria took a breath. Of course, Margaret. Her mother-in-law swept into the room wearing burgundy silk and diamonds. Her lips pursed as she examined Victoria's gown. That's what you're wearing. Victoria smoothed the fabric again. Sophie designed it for me. Do you think it's too much? It's too noticeable for a woman in your condition. Margaret's study dropped to Victoria's belly. You're quite large for 7 months. Are you certain about the due date? The words hit like a slap. Victoria had heard variations of this for weeks. Too big, too emotional, too much drama, as if pregnancy was something shameful she should hide. Our Richardson confirmed everything is normal, Victoria said quietly. Margaret sniffed. Well, try not to draw too much attention tonight. This gala is important for the Sterling name. Your father's venue is lovely, but reputation matters more than real estate. She left before Victoria could respond. Victoria sank onto the bed. Her hands cradled her belly. The baby kicked again, and she smiled despite everything. It's okay, she whispered. We're okay. Another knock, this one familiar. Please tell me the Wicked Witch of the Upper East Side just left, Sophie Bennett called through the door. Victoria laughed, actually laughed. Come in. Sophie entered carrying a makeup bag and hair tools. Her red hair was pulled back, and her green eyes sparkled with mischief. She'd been Victoria's best friend since college. The sister she never had. I saw Margaret in the hallway looking like she'd sucked a lemon, Sophie said. She set down her supplies and hugged Victoria carefully. What did she say this time? The usual, I'm too big. The dress is too noticeable. I shouldn't draw attention. Victoria tried to smile. Same old song. Sophie's jaw tightened. That woman, I swear, you look absolutely gorgeous. This dress is my best work, is my best. She stepped back, studying Victoria. But something's wrong. What is it? Victoria hesitated. Sophie always saw through her. Harrison hasn't called or texted. He left early this morning and hasn't checked in. The words tumbled out. I know tonight is busy. The gala is huge. But he always texts, always. And today nothing. Sophie's expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes. Worry? Guilt? But it vanished so quickly Victoria thought she imagined it. Men are idiots about phones, Sophie said lightly. Come on, let me do your hair. You're going to walk into that ballroom and knock everyone dead. Victoria wanted to believe her, wanted to ignore the knot in her stomach that had nothing to do with pregnancy. She sat while Sophie worked. They talked about the nursery, about baby names, about anything except the truth neither of them wanted to voice. 45 minutes later, Victoria studied her reflection. Sophie had worked magic. Her dark hair was swept up, showing off the diamond earrings Harrison gave her for their 5th anniversary. Her makeup glowed, the dress fit perfectly. She looked beautiful. So why did she feel like she was preparing for battle instead of a party? Ready? Sophie asked. Victoria touched her belly one more time. Ready. The Hayes Grand Ballroom was spectacular. Victoria's father, Richard Hayes, had built his fortune on real estate. This venue was his crown jewel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. White roses covered every surface. The Manhattan skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. 300 guests mingled in designer gowns and custom suits, old money and new money mixing for charity. The Sterling Foundation Gala raised millions every year for children's hospitals. It was the social event of the season. Victoria arrived with her father. Richard Hayes was 62, silver-haired, powerful. He'd built his empire from nothing. A self-made billionaire who owned half of Manhattan. You look beautiful, sweetheart, he said, squeezing her hand. Just like your mother. Victoria's mother had died when she was 12. Cancer, fast and cruel. Her father never remarried, just threw himself into work and raising his only daughter. Thanks, Dad. She scanned the crowd. Have you seen Harrison? Richard's expression hardened slightly. He's here somewhere, probably networking. Something in his tone made Victoria glance at him sharply, but he was already smiling at a donor, leading her into the crowd. She spotted Harrison across the ballroom. Her breath caught. Even after 7 years of marriage, he was handsome. Tall, perfectly fitted tuxedo, dark hair slightly gray at the temples. The kind of man who commanded attention. He was talking to someone, a woman in red. Victoria's stomach dropped. Amber Caldwell, Harrison's paralegal, 27 years old, beautiful, ambitious. They stood too close. Harrison's hand gestured as he spoke. Amber laughed. Her hand touched his arm. It was nothing. Professional colleagues at a work event. So why couldn't Victoria breathe? She started toward them. The crowd parted. Women smiled at her pregnant belly. Men congratulated her. But Victoria barely heard them. Harrison saw her approaching. His face did something complicated. Guilt, irritation, fear, all three in rapid succession. Then his lawyer mask slid into place. Charming smile, hand extended to pull her close. There you are, he said. His hand on her lower back felt wrong. Performative, like he was acting for an audience. Hi, Victoria said. She looked at Amber. Hello. Amber's smile was sharp. Mrs. Sterling, you look absolutely radiant. Pregnancy suits you. The words were kind. The tone was not. Thank you, Victoria managed. I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. Harrison invited me, Amber said smoothly. The Sterling Foundation does such important work. I wanted to support it. Harrison's hand tightened on Victoria's back. Warning or restraint, she couldn't tell. That's very generous, Victoria said. If you'll excuse me, I need to use the restroom. She pulled away from Harrison before he could respond. Her heels clicked across the marble floor. She felt their eyes on her back, felt the weight of something unspoken. The ladies' room was empty. Thank God. Victoria gripped the marble sink, staring at her reflection. Her hands were shaking. This was ridiculous. She was being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones made everything feel dramatic. But then why did her instincts scream danger? The door opened behind her. Victoria looked up. Amber Caldwell stood in the doorway. Her red dress seemed even brighter in the soft lighting, her smile even sharper. "We need to talk about Harrison," Amber said, and Victoria's world began to crack. Victoria's hands tightened on the sink. "I don't think we have anything to discuss." Amber walked further into the bathroom. Her heels echoed on the tile. She checked under the stall doors. Empty. They were alone. "I'm pregnant too," Amber said. No preamble, no softness, just fact. 3 months. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. The bathroom tilted. She gripped the sink harder, her knuckles white. "You're lying." Amber pulled out her phone, scrolled, turned it toward Victoria. Text messages. Dozens of them, Harrison's name at the top. Intimate words, plans, promises, then photos. Harrison and Amber at restaurants Victoria didn't recognize. Harrison's hand on Amber's waist. Harrison kissing her neck. Then the sonogram image. Black and white. Tiny shape floating in darkness. Caption. Baby Sterling. Victoria couldn't breathe. The room spun. This couldn't be real. This was a nightmare. She'd wake up. She'd have to wake up. "He's been planning to leave you," Amber continued. Her voice was almost conversational, like discussing the weather. "He only stays because of your father's business connections, your family money. But he doesn't love you anymore. I'm not sure he ever did." Victoria's inner voice screamed, "I knew. For months I knew. I just kept making excuses for him. Every late night, every missed dinner, every time he pulled away, I knew." "Why are you telling me this?" Victoria whispered. Amber's smile turned cold. "Because I'm done waiting. Because you should know the truth. Because tonight, this ends." She walked out. Victoria stood frozen. Her reflection stared back. Pregnant, trusting, stupid. How long had she been making excuses? 6 months? 8? Longer? The door opened again. Sophie rushed in. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere." She stopped, saw Victoria's face. "What happened?" "She's pregnant." Victoria's voice didn't sound like her own. "Harrison's mistress. She's pregnant. She just showed me everything." Sophie's face went white. "Oh God, Victoria, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Something in her tone made Victoria look up sharply. "You knew." It wasn't a question. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I saw them. 6 months ago, at a restaurant. They were together, really together. I confronted Harrison. He threatened me, said if I told you, he'd make sure you never spoke to me again. He said you'd choose him over me, that I'd lose my best friend. I believed him. I stayed quiet. I'm so sorry. I should have told you anyway." Victoria wanted to be angry, should be angry, but she just felt hollow. "It's okay," she said. The words came automatically, always apologizing, always smoothing things over. "He manipulated you too." "No, it's not okay. You deserve to know." Sophie grabbed her hands. "But we can leave, right now. We'll go out the back. You don't have to do this tonight." Victoria looked at their joined hands, then at her reflection, at the belly carrying Harrison's child, at the gown Sophie designed with love, at the woman she'd become, small, apologetic, invisible. "No," she said slowly. "This is my father's event. This is my family's name. I won't let them humiliate him. Or me." She walked out of the bathroom. Back into the ballroom. Sophie followed, whispering urgent pleas to reconsider. But Victoria was done reconsidering, done making herself smaller, done pretending she didn't see what was right in front of her. She found Harrison near the bar, with Amber. Of course, the conversations around them dimmed as Victoria approached. People sensed drama. Society always did. "Harrison," Victoria said calmly, "we need to leave. Now." His face went through those complicated expressions again. Guilt, irritation, caught. "Victoria, you're making a scene," he said quietly. The charming smile stayed fixed. "Let's discuss this later." I'm 7 months pregnant with your child, Victoria said. Her voice carried. People nearby stopped talking, heads turned. And I just learned I'm not the only one. The ballroom went silent. 300 pairs of eyes swiveled toward them. Harrison's face paled. You're emotional. Pregnancy hormones. Let's talk about this privately. The gaslighting was so automatic, so practiced. How many times had he done this? How many times had she believed it? I don't know what she told you, Harrison continued. His lawyer voice, reasonable, rational, but you're misunderstanding the situation. Don't do this here, he added, lower, threatening. Think of your father. Margaret Sterling pushed through the crowd. Her face was fury and fear combined. Victoria, dear, perhaps you should rest, she said. Her hand reached for Victoria's arm. You're clearly not well. Victoria stepped back. I'm perfectly well. I'm simply asking my husband about his pregnant mistress. The words echoed in the sudden silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones rose. Everyone was recording. The Sterling family scandal unfolding in real time. Amber stepped forward. She didn't look ashamed. She looked triumphant. Harrison, tell her, Amber said, loud enough for the nearest dozen people to hear. Tell her you love me. Tell her the baby you actually want is mine. Victoria watched Harrison's face, watched him calculate, watched him try to find the angle that would save his career, his reputation, his carefully constructed life. He didn't deny it. That silence was answer enough. Victoria turned to walk away. She was done. She'd said her piece. Let them have each other. But Amber wasn't finished. You think you're so perfect, Amber called after her. The billionaire's daughter, the society wife. But you're just a placeholder, a connection to money. Harrison never loved you, he used you. Just like your father used his money to buy everything, including your pathetic marriage. Victoria stopped. Something inside her that had bent and bent and bent finally reached its breaking point. She turned back, not to fight, not to argue, just to speak one simple truth. You're welcome to him, Victoria said, her voice steady, clear. A man who cheats on his pregnant wife with his employee, real prize. The crowd murmured agreement. Victoria saw approval on faces, disgust directed at Harrison and Amber. Amber's face twisted. The younger woman wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. Victoria's calm enraged her more than tears would have. Amber grabbed a champagne glass from a nearby table. Victoria thought she'd throw it. Expected cold champagne. Public humiliation. Instead, Amber grabbed the vodka bottle from behind the bar. Everything slowed down. Victoria noticed everything. The weight of her belly, the ache in her swollen feet, the baby kicking inside her, the cold of her wedding ring, the smell of white roses and lilies from centerpieces, the click of her father's shoes as he started toward her. Amber upended the vodka bottle over Victoria's head. The alcohol splashed cold across her hair, her face, her chest. It soaked into the ivory silk of her maternity gown. The chemical smell burned her nose. The crowd gasped. Some woman shrieked. Victoria stood frozen. Alcohol dripped down her belly, down her legs, pooling on the marble floor. Then Amber produced a lighter from her clutch. The small silver Zippo caught the chandelier light. If I can't have him, Amber said, her voice high, hysterical, you don't deserve him either. The lighter flicked open. The flame danced, and the world exploded into fire. The flame touched the vodka-soaked silk. The fabric ignited instantly. Orange and yellow flames raced up Victoria's gown, up her pregnant belly. The heat was immediate and agonizing. Her skin burned. The baby kicked frantically inside her. Victoria screamed. Her hands flew to her stomach. Protective instinct overriding everything else. Her baby. She had to protect her baby. Get back. Her father's voice cut through her terror. Then strong arms tackled her. Marcus, the security chief, slammed her to the marble floor. His body covered hers, protecting her belly. His suit jacket smothered the flames. White foam from a fire extinguisher covered them both. The chemical smell mixed with burning silk and scorched skin. Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her hands pressed against her stomach, searching desperately for movement. Please kick. Please be okay. Please, God, please. The baby kicked. hard, angry. Victoria sobbed with relief so intense it hurt worse than the burns. "Ma'am, stay still," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Paramedics are coming. You're okay, the fire's out." Sirens wailed outside. Multiple vehicles, police, fire, ambulance. Someone had called 911 immediately. Victoria turned her head. Through the foam and her tears, she saw Harrison. He stood 5 feet away, frozen, his face white, his hands at his sides. He hadn't moved to help her. His pregnant wife was on fire and he hadn't moved. That realization cut deeper than the burns. Richard Hayes was shouting orders. His security team moved with military precision. Guests were being herded back. The ballroom was a crime scene now. Detective Sarah Walsh appeared. She'd been at the Gala as extra security, standard for events at this venue. She moved immediately toward Amber. "Don't move," Walsh said, her hand on her weapon. "Amber Caldwell, you're under arrest for assault with intent to commit bodily harm." Amber tried to run. She made it 3 steps in her red heels before 2 security guards blocked her path. Walsh cuffed her quickly, read her rights in that flat cop voice. Amber was screaming, "It's not my fault. She provoked me. She embarrassed him. She deserved it. She stole what was mine." Paramedics rushed in. They surrounded Victoria, checking her burns, checking her vitals, checking the baby's heartbeat. "Baby's heartbeat is strong," one paramedic said. "Female. Kind eyes. You protected your stomach instinctively. The burns are mostly on your arms and upper chest. We need to get you to the hospital for observation. Risk of premature labor from the stress." Victoria nodded, couldn't speak. Shock was setting in. They lifted her onto a gurney. The crowd parted. 300 people watching. Phones still recording. The Sterling Foundation Gala would trend on social media by midnight. Harrison tried to approach. Richard Hayes stepped in his path. "You don't touch my daughter ever again," Richard said. His voice was death, cold and final. "That's not legal," Harrison said, his lawyer voice returning. "I'm her husband. Let me see my wife." "The mother of your child just had her dress set on fire by your pregnant mistress," Richard said. Each word precise, sharp. "You want to discuss legality?" Harrison's face crumbled. For just a moment, Victoria saw real emotion. Fear, regret, maybe even horror at what he'd allowed to happen. But it was too late for regret. Sophie climbed into the ambulance with Victoria, held her hand, whispered reassurances that sounded like prayers. As they pulled away, Victoria looked back at the Hayes Grand Ballroom. The venue her father built. The place where she almost died. The place where her old life burned away. The ambulance ride was a blur of questions and pain. Victoria's arms throbbed. Her chest felt like it was still on fire even though the flames were out. Second-degree burns, the paramedic said. Serious but treatable. The baby kicked steadily. Angry little jabs that felt like the most beautiful thing in the world. "Stay with me," Sophie said. Her hand gripped Victoria's. "Focus on my voice. You're okay. The baby's okay. You're both going to be fine." But Victoria's mind kept circling back to one moment. Harrison standing frozen while she burned. Harrison not moving to help. Harrison choosing self-preservation over protecting his wife and unborn child. What kind of man does that? The answer was clear. The kind of man who planned this, or at least allowed it to happen. They arrived at the hospital. Emergency room staff swarmed. Dr. Helen Richardson was already there. Victoria's obstetrician had been called immediately. She took charge with calm efficiency. "Let's get those burns treated and check the baby thoroughly," Richardson said. "You're going to be okay, Victoria. Both of you." They wheeled her into a private room, cut away the ruined gown. Victoria watched the ivory silk fall away in charred pieces. Sophie's beautiful design destroyed. Everything destroyed. The hospital staff worked quickly, cleaning the burns, bandaging, starting an IV for fluids and pain medication, hooking up fetal monitors. The steady beep of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. Strong, healthy, furious. "Your baby is a fighter," Dr. Richardson said. She smiled as she checked the monitors. "Heartbeat is perfect. No signs of distress. You protected your stomach instinctively. All the burns are on your arms and upper chest. The baby is fine." Victoria started crying, relief and trauma and shock all crashing over her at once. But we need to keep you overnight, de Richardson continued. Risk of premature labor from stress. And we need to watch those burns carefully. Second-degree burns are serious. No infection, proper healing. You did the right thing covering your belly. Victoria nodded, couldn't speak past the tears. Richard Hayes appeared in the doorway. His face was haggard. He'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Sweetheart, he said. His voice broke. Victoria held out her bandaged hand. He crossed to her bedside, took her hand gently, careful of the burns. I'm okay, Dad, she whispered. We're okay. I should have seen it, Richard said. Should have known. Should have protected you better. You couldn't have known she'd do this. Not the fire. Harrison. Richard's jaw tightened. I've suspected for months, seen the signs, but I convinced myself I was being overprotective, that I didn't want to see my daughter hurt. I should have trusted my instincts. Victoria thought about her own instincts. All those moments she knew something was wrong, all the times she made excuses. We all missed it, she said. Sophie stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, guilt written across her face. Sophie, Victoria said, come here. Her best friend crossed to the bed. Tears streamed down her face. I should have told you, Sophie whispered. 6 months ago, the moment I saw them. I should have told you. He threatened you, manipulated you. That's what he does. Victoria squeezed her hand. He isolated me from everyone who might tell me the truth. That's the playbook. I don't blame you. A knock on the door interrupted them. Detective Sarah Walsh entered with a uniformed officer. I'm sorry to intrude, Walsh said, but I need to take your statement while everything's fresh. Victoria nodded, took a breath, and began recounting the evening. The bathroom confrontation with Amber, the public scene at the gala, the vodka, the lighter, the fire. Walsh took notes. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but Victoria saw the anger in her eyes. This is attempted murder, Walsh said when Victoria finished. Assault with intent to commit bodily harm. While you're pregnant, that's assault on 2 victims. Amber Caldwell is in custody. She'll face serious charges. What about Harrison? Richard asked, his voice hard. We're investigating his involvement, Walsh said carefully. But unless we can prove he knew about Amber's plan, there's not much we can charge him with. Adultery isn't a crime in New York. But abandonment is grounds for divorce, Richard said, and I'll make sure he loses everything else. Walsh left to continue her investigation. The uniformed officer stayed outside the room. Protection detail, just in case. Victoria lay back against the pillows, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. The baby kicked again, a little flutter that felt like a question. Are we safe now? Yes, Victoria whispered, touching her bandaged belly. We're safe, I promise. Whatever happens, I've got you. But even as she said it, Victoria's mind kept circling back to Harrison's frozen face, his lack of movement, his choice. And in the ambulance, she'd apologized. The memory hit her suddenly. She'd said, I'm sorry, I ruined Dad's gala. I'm sorry, I caused a scene. What was she apologizing for? Someone just tried to kill her, tried to burn her alive. And her first instinct was to say sorry. How many times had she apologized for things that weren't her fault? How many times had she made herself small to make Harrison comfortable? How many times had she convinced herself it was normal for a wife to feel invisible in her own marriage? The realization settled over her like ice water. Cold, clarifying, terrible. She'd been making excuses for Harrison for years. Every missed dinner, every late night at the office, every time he pulled away from touching her belly, every time he made her feel like she was too needy, too emotional, too much, she'd known. Somewhere deep inside, she'd known. She just kept hoping she was wrong. Victoria woke in the hospital bed to gray dawn light filtering through the window. For one blissful second, she forgot. Then her arms throbbed with pain, and memory came crashing back. The gala, the fire, the betrayal. She was alive. The baby was safe. That's what mattered. Sophie was asleep in the chair beside her bed, neck bent at an awkward angle. Richard sat in the other chair, wide awake, watching the door like a guard. Dad, Victoria said quietly, You should go home. Get some rest. Not a chance. His voice was rough. I'm staying until you're discharged. A nurse came in to check vitals and change bandages. The burns looked angry and raw in the morning light. Victoria forced herself to look at them, to acknowledge what had been done to her. They'll scar, the nurse said gently, but they'll fade with time. You are healing well. Dr. Richardson will be in soon for final checks. After the nurse left, Victoria's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She'd forgotten about it entirely. Someone must have retrieved it from the Gala. 127 missed calls, 73 text messages. Victoria scrolled through them. Friends, acquaintances, society matrons she barely knew. Everyone had heard. The videos were everywhere. The videos were viral by midnight, just as she'd predicted. Most messages were supportive. Some were curious. A few were vicious, blaming the Victoria for causing drama at a charity event. Then she saw the message from an unknown number. This is Margaret Sterling. We need to discuss how to contain this disaster. For the baby's sake. Contain, the baby's sake. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm so sorry. Not, how can I help? Contain the disaster. Protect the Sterling reputation. The baby was just an excuse. Victoria set the phone down carefully. Something was happening inside her. The apologetic woman who'd spent 7 years making herself smaller was burning away just like that ivory gown. Victoria? Sophie woke up, rubbing her neck. How are you feeling? Angry, Victoria said. It was the first honest emotion she'd named in hours. I'm so angry. Sophie and Richard exchanged glances. Good, Richard said. Anger is useful. Anger gets things done. Dr. Richardson arrived for morning rounds. She examined the burns, checked the baby's heartbeat, reviewed the monitors from overnight. Everything looked stable, honest, she said. Baby's heartbeat stayed strong all night. No signs of premature labor. The burns are healing as expected. I'm comfortable discharging you with strict instructions for follow-up care. Can I go home? Victoria asked, then stopped. Where was home? The Sterling mansion where Harrison lived? Where his mother lived? Where every room held memories that were now poisoned? You're coming to my house, Richard said firmly. The estate has plenty of room. You'll stay there while we figure things out. Victoria nodded. Relief washed over her. She couldn't face the Sterling mansion. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Discharge paperwork took hours. Prescriptions for pain medication and burn care. Instructions for rest and stress reduction. Appointments scheduled for follow-up burns treatment and prenatal care. Sophie went to the Sterling mansion to pack Victoria's things. Escorted by Richard's security team because Harrison would be there. Victoria gave her a list. Clothes, toiletries, personal items, the baby books from the nursery. Don't take anything that's not yours, Richard instructed. We'll inventory everything later for the divorce proceedings. The word divorce felt surreal. Yesterday morning, Victoria had been married, planning for a baby, building a life. Now everything was ashes. Richard's estate was in the Hamptons, 45 minutes from Manhattan, the house where Victoria grew up after her mother died. Her childhood bedroom was still there, preserved exactly as she'd left it for college. They arrived in early afternoon. The staff had prepared everything. Her old room freshened, flowers on the nightstand, the adjoining sitting room set up with everything she might need. Victoria stood in the doorway of her childhood bedroom, the pale blue walls, the bookshelf full of art history texts and poetry, the window seat where she used to read for hours, the desk where she'd applied to college, dreaming of her future. This wasn't the future she'd imagined. She sat on the familiar bed, touched the quilt her mother had made, and finally let herself break down. Sophie held her while she cried, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. The baby kicked, disturbed by her mother's distress. That just made Victoria cry harder. I was so stupid, she choked out. The signs were everywhere. Everyone could see it except me. No, Sophie said fiercely. He was a liar, a manipulator. That's not your fault. But Victoria kept thinking about all the moments she'd made excuses, all the times she'd convinced herself she was being paranoid, all the nights she'd pretended to be asleep to avoid the distance between them in bed. The pregnancy had been the final proof that something was deeply wrong. Harrison stopped touching her belly after the 4th month, stopped asking about doctor's appointments, stopped planning for the baby. He'd already checked out, already moved on to Amber. Victoria just hadn't wanted to see it. Richard brought tea, sat in the window seat, said nothing at first, just gave her space to fall apart. Finally, he spoke. "Your mother would know what to say," he said quietly. "I just know I want to destroy him." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Get in line. I'm serious. I can make his life very difficult. Cancel business deals. Call in favors. Make sure he never works in corporate law again in this city. Is that legal? I don't care." Victoria looked at her father, the man who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd raised her alone after her mother died, who'd walked her down the aisle 7 years ago and shaken Harrison's hand, trusting him to protect his only daughter. "He let me burn, Dad," Victoria whispered. "I was on fire and he just stood there." Richard's face went hard, dangerous. The face he wore in boardrooms when destroying competitors. "Then we'll make sure he burns too," he said, metaphorically speaking, in every way that matters. Sophie's phone rang. She answered, listened, her eyes widening. "That was my assistant," she said. "The videos from the gala are everywhere, national news, social media. The Sterling Foundation is getting flooded with calls." Margaret released a statement. She pulled up the article on her phone, read aloud. "The Sterling family regrets the unfortunate incident at last night's charity gala. While we're relieved Victoria and the baby are safe, we must address the drama that disrupted an event meant to benefit children's hospitals. Amber Caldwell's actions were inexcusable and appear to be the result of mental instability. We ask for privacy during this difficult time." Victoria stared. She blamed me for the drama, not Harrison for the affair, not Amber for attempted murder, me for disrupting the event. "The Sterling family is doing damage control," Richard said. His voice was ice. "Protecting their precious reputation. They don't care that you almost died. They care about their image." Victoria's phone buzzed. Text message from Harrison's number. "Victoria, please, we need to talk. This has all been blown out of proportion. Amber is unstable. I was trying to end things quietly. I never wanted any of this. Think about our child. Call me." Victoria read it aloud. Sophie and Richard both made disgusted noises. "That's gaslighting," Sophie said. "Classic manipulation. He's minimizing the affair, blaming Amber, making you responsible for the baby's well-being." "He says think about our child," Victoria said. "The child I protected while burning. The child he didn't move to help." She blocked Harrison's number. It felt like a small victory. More messages came in, society friends taking sides, some supporting Victoria, others whispering that she must have driven Harrison to infidelity, that she'd become boring in pregnancy, that she should have handled it more discreetly. Victoria wanted to throw her phone against the wall. Instead, she did what she always did when overwhelmed. She organized. At 2 in the morning when she couldn't sleep, when the burns ached and the baby kicked and her mind raced, Victoria reorganized her childhood closet. Sophie had brought boxes of maternity clothes from the Sterling mansion. Victoria hung them by color, by season, by function. Each piece was a memory. The dress she wore to announce her pregnancy. The sweater Harrison said made her look frumpy. The gown destroyed by fire and vodka. She folded the baby clothes Sophie had packed. Tiny onesies, soft blankets, little socks that would fit on thumbs. Each piece represented a future she'd have to rebuild alone. She worked mechanically, organizing the chaos she could control because the big chaos was too overwhelming. Richard found her at 3 in the morning, didn't say anything about the time or the obsessive organizing, just brought more tea. "Your mother did this too," he said. "When she got her diagnosis, she reorganized every closet in the house, every drawer, every shelf. She said it helped her feel like something was in order." Victoria paused, a tiny yellow onesie in her hands. "I miss her. I wish she were here. She'd know what to do." "She'd tell you that you're stronger than you think," Richard said. "That Hayes women don't break. We bend and then we come back harder." "I don't feel strong. I feel stupid and used and ashamed." "You have nothing to be ashamed of. You trusted someone you loved. That's not weakness. That's courage." Richard sat beside her on the floor. But now you know who he really is. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? Victoria looked at the organized closet, the color-coded clothes, the neatly folded baby items, the life she'd have to build without Harrison. I'm going to destroy him, she said quietly. Not with my father's money or power, with the truth, with evidence, with justice. Richard smiled. That's my girl. Morning brought clarity and determination. Victoria woke with a purpose she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. She was done being a victim, done apologizing, done making excuses. Time to fight back. Richard had already arranged a meeting with James Thornton, the best divorce attorney in New York. Ruthless, strategic, expensive. Victoria didn't care about the con. Her father could afford it. More importantly, she deserved it. Thornton arrived at 10 in the morning. He was 58, silver-haired, with the sharp eyes of a predator who'd spent decades in courtrooms. He carried a briefcase and an iPad full of preliminary research. They met in Richard's study. Victoria wore soft clothes that didn't irritate her bandaged arms. Sophie sat beside her for support. Richard stood by the window, looking like he wanted to punch something. Mrs. Sterling, Thornton said, settling into a leather chair, let me be direct. This isn't just a divorce case. This is assault, attempted murder, endangerment of an unborn child. We bury him. Victoria blinked. I thought you were a divorce attorney. I am, but when your spouse's mistress sets you on fire at a charity gala, that changes the scope considerably. Thornton opened his iPad. I've been reviewing the evidence collected so far. It's substantial. Video footage from 300 guests, witness statements, hospital records documenting your injuries, police reports on Amber Caldwell's arrest. And that's just the beginning. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. The question is, how far do you want to take this? Simple divorce? Or complete destruction of Harrison Sterling's life and career? Victoria thought about Harrison frozen while she burned, about Margaret's message about containing the disaster, about 7 years of being made to feel small and needy and wrong. I want justice, she said clearly, for me, for our baby, for every woman who might have believed his lies in the future. Thornton smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Good, then let's begin. He spent the next hour outlining the strategy. First, they'd subpoena text messages and emails between Harrison and Amber, financial records to track money movement, security footage from Harrison's law firm to establish the timeline of the affair. I've already requested phone records, Thornton said. With your permission, I'll also petition to access joint bank accounts and credit card statements. I suspect we'll find interesting patterns. Like what? Victoria asked. Hotels, restaurants, gifts, money transfers. Thornton's expression was grim. Men having affairs leave paper trails. They always do. Sophie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale. What? Victoria asked. Harrison's at the gate. He's demanding to see you. Richard was out of his chair instantly. I'll handle it. No. Victoria stood. Her legs felt shaky, but she locked her knees. I'll talk to him. On my terms. Here. With witnesses. Are you sure? Richard asked. You don't have to see him. I want to. I need to. Victoria looked at Thornton. Can he legally be kept from seeing me? You can refuse to see him. He's not entitled to access just because you're married, especially given the circumstances. Thornton paused. But if you want to confront him with witnesses present, that could be useful. People reveal themselves under pressure. Victoria nodded. Then let's do it. In the library, with all of you present, and I want it recorded. Thornton pulled out his phone. I'll set up audio recording, legal in New York with one-party consent. 20 minutes later, Victoria sat in the library. Richard stood by the fireplace, Sophie by the window, Thornton in the corner with his phone recording. Marcus stationed himself by the door. Harrison was escorted in by security. He looked terrible, unshaven, wrinkled suit, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Good, Victoria thought viciously. Let him suffer. Victoria, he said. Relief flooded his face. Thank God. I've been so worried. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? The concern sounded genuine, but Victoria had learned to see past the performance. The baby and I are fine, she said coolly. No thanks to you. Harrison flinched. That's not fair. I was in shock. Everything happened so fast. I didn't know how to react. You didn't move to help me. I was on fire and you just stood there. I was paralyzed, traumatized. You can't blame me for having a normal fear response. There it was, the deflection, making his abandonment about his trauma instead of her attempted murder. Sit down, Victoria said. We need to talk. Harrison sat across from her, reached for her hand. She pulled back. Don't touch me. His hand dropped. Hurt flashed across his face. Calculated hurt. Performative emotion. Victoria was done being moved by it. Tell me about Amber, she said. Harrison's jaw tightened. It's not what you think. Then what is it? It was a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake. She came on to me. I was weak. It didn't mean anything. How long? Victoria, how long, Harrison? He looked away. 8 months. 8 months. The affair started before she got pregnant, before they'd decided to try for a baby, before he'd held her hand at the first doctor's appointment and smiled at the sonogram. All of it had been a lie. Is she really pregnant? Victoria asked. Harrison hesitated. She says she is. Is it yours? I don't know, maybe. She's not reliable. But you slept with her without protection. Another hesitation. Sometimes. Victoria felt detached, like she was watching this conversation happen to someone else. The man across from her was a stranger. She'd been married to a stranger for 7 years. When were you planning to tell me? She asked. I wasn't. I was going to end it with Amber. Move forward with you and the baby. Put it behind us. Did your mother know? Harrison's face told her everything before he spoke. She suspected. She told me to be discreet, that these things happen, that I needed to protect the family name. Of course Margaret knew. Of course she'd told him to hide it rather than end it. Reputation mattered more than honesty. Tell me something, Victoria said. She kept her voice level. Clinical. When did you stop loving me? Was it gradual or was there a day? Harrison opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't find the right lie fast enough. That silence was her answer. You never loved me at all, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. That's not true. I did love you. We grew apart. No, we didn't grow apart. You checked out, you stopped trying, you found someone younger and more exciting, and you decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. You got pregnant. Everything became about the baby. I felt like I didn't matter. There it was, blaming her for his affair, because she was pregnant with his child, because she dared to focus on growing a human being inside her body. Victoria's hands clenched. The bandages pulled at her burns. The pain grounded her. Get out, she said quietly. Victoria, please. We can work through this. For the baby, don't throw away 7 years of marriage over a mistake. Over a mistake? Her voice rose. Your mistress set me on fire, tried to kill me and our baby, and you let it happen. You knew she'd be at the gala. You knew she was unstable, and you let me walk into that situation blind. I didn't know she'd do that. I swear I didn't know. You knew something. You planned something. Or you allowed something. Victoria stood. Everyone in the room tensed. Get out of my father's house. Don't contact me again. Don't come near me. Anything you need to say goes through my attorney. She gestured to Thornton, who stepped forward with a smile like a shark. Mr. Sterling, I'm James Thornton. I'll be representing Mrs. Sterling in all proceedings moving forward. Divorce, custody, asset division, and potential criminal charges if evidence warrants. Harrison's face went white. Criminal charges? Against me? I didn't do anything. We'll let the evidence speak for itself, Thornton said smoothly. You'll be hearing from me very soon. I suggest you retain counsel immediately. Marcus escorted Harrison out. He went without further protest, but his face showed fear now. Good. When he was gone, Victoria's knees gave out. She sank back into the chair. Her whole body shook. You did great, Sophie said, kneeling beside her, bro. You were so strong. I don't feel strong. My voice almost broke a dozen times, but it didn't. You held firm. Richard came over, squeezed her shoulder gently. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Thornton stopped the recording. That was very useful. He admitted to the affair, admitted his mother knew, admitted he'd planned to hide it, all on record. What happens now? Victoria asked. Now we build the case. Financial records came through this morning. Want to see something interesting? He pulled up documents on his iPad, bank statements, credit card bills, transfer records. Victoria's stomach dropped as she read the highlighted entries. Harrison had been liquidating their joint accounts. Slowly, carefully, transferring money to accounts in his name only. He'd started months ago. He's been preparing to leave, Thornton said, moving assets out of reach, setting himself up to claim he has no money while hiding significant amounts elsewhere. Can he do that? Victoria asked. Not legally, but people try all the time. Thornton scrolled further, but here's the really interesting part. This withdrawal, $50,000 in cash, 1 week before the gala. Any idea what that was for? Victoria shook her head. I'd bet anything it was payment to Amber Caldwell, Thornton said. We'll need to confirm, but if Harrison paid her to do something at the gala, even if he didn't specifically tell her to commit arson, that's conspiracy. That's criminal. The room went silent as the implications sank in. He paid her to attack me, Victoria said slowly. We don't know that for certain yet, but we will. Detective Walsh is pursuing that line of inquiry. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Message from an unknown number. Margaret Sterling again. Victoria, we need to meet, woman to woman, for the sake of your child, my grandchild. Please. Victoria showed the message to Thornton. He read it and smiled coldly. She wants to negotiate. Offer you money to stay quiet. Sign an NDA. Protect the Sterling name. What should I do? That's up to you. But if you meet with her, record everything. Victoria looked at her father and Sophie, at the attorney who was fighting for her, at the evidence of Harrison's betrayal spread across the iPad. Set up the meeting, she said. Let's see what she's willing to pay for my silence. Because Victoria already knew the truth, her silence wasn't for sale, not for any amount of money. But watching Margaret try to buy it would be instructive. And maybe, just maybe, Margaret Sterling would reveal something useful, something that would help bury Harrison completely. Victoria touched her bandaged belly. The baby kicked in response. We're going to win, she whispered to her unborn child. I promise you, we're going to win. Margaret Sterling arrived at Richard's estate the next afternoon. She came with her own attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase full of documents. They met in the formal living room. Victoria wore a soft sweater that hid her bandages. She wanted to look strong, not wounded. Sophie sat beside her. Richard stood by the fireplace, silent and watchful. Thornton was present as Victoria's legal representation, and Victoria's phone was recording in her pocket. Legal in New York with one-party consent. Margaret looked older than Victoria had ever seen her. The society mask had cracks. She sat across from Victoria, hands folded, diamonds glinting. Thank you for seeing me, Margaret Swedman. Her voice had lost its usual condescending tone. How are you feeling? I have second-degree burns on my arms and chest, Victoria said bluntly. But the baby's fine, in case you were wondering. Margaret flinched. Of course I was wondering. That's my grandchild. Is it? Because your son tried to kill us, or at least let someone else try. That's not fair. Harrison made mistakes, but he's not a murderer. Then why are you here, Margaret? The older woman exchanged glances with her attorney. The sharp-faced woman pulled documents from her briefcase. We're here to offer a resolution, the attorney said. Her voice was professionally pleasant. One that benefits everyone involved, especially your child. What kind of resolution? Thornton asked. The attorney slid papers across the coffee table. A non-disclosure agreement, in exchange for Mrs. Sterling's silence about the events at the gala and her agreement not to pursue criminal charges against Mr. Sterling, the family will provide substantial financial compensation. Victoria didn't touch the papers. How substantial? The attorney named a figure, $2 million. Sophie gasped. Richard's jaw tightened. Thornton remained impassive. Victoria laughed, actually laughed. First real laugh in days, and it was at the absurdity of this moment. You want me to sign away my voice after your son's mistress tried to burn me alive while pregnant with your grandchild? Victoria said. How much is my silence worth to you? Put a number on it. Margaret's face flushed. This isn't about money. It's about protecting the family, protecting your child from the scandal. My child was almost killed. That's the scandal, not the fact that everyone knows about it. The media attention is destroying Harrison's career. The Sterling name is being dragged through the mud. Our business deals are falling apart. Society has turned on us. Margaret's voice rose. All because of one mistake, one moment of instability from that woman. That woman was your son's mistress, your son's pregnant mistress, your son's pregnant mistress that he paid to do something at my father's gala. Victoria leaned forward. Or didn't you know about the $50,000 cash withdrawal? Margaret's face went carefully blank. Too blank. She knew. I don't know what you're talking about, Margaret said. Yes, you do. You knew Harrison was planning something. Maybe not the fire specifically, but something public. Something that would end my marriage and free him to be with Amber. You knew, and you didn't warn me. That's absurd. I would never. You told him to be discreet, to protect the family name. You cared more about reputation than about your daughter-in-law's safety, than your grandchild's safety. Margaret stood abruptly. This was clearly a mistake. We came here in good faith, trying to find a solution. But you're determined to destroy my son out of spite. I'm determined to get justice. There's a difference, but justice? Margaret's voice turned cold, sharp, the society mask cracking completely. You married my son for his money and connections. Everyone knows it. You were the billionaire's daughter, looking to add old money pedigree to your family. Don't pretend this marriage was some great love story. The words landed like slaps. Victoria felt Sophie tense beside her. Richard took a step forward. Thornton's hand moved, ready to intervene. But Victoria felt something click into place. The final piece of understanding. You never liked me, she said quietly. From the beginning, because I didn't need Harrison's money, because I had my own, because I wouldn't be controlled by the Sterling family name. You were never right for him, too independent, too opinionated, too much of a person, Victoria finished. I'm sorry I didn't shrink myself small enough for your comfort, Margaret. I'm sorry I expected your son to actually love me instead of using me as a business connection and social prop. She stood, bandages pulling at her burns. The pain grounded her, reminded her she'd survived worse than this confrontation. Mrs. Sterling, my father owns half of Manhattan, Victoria said, each word precise, clear. Your money means nothing to me. My voice? That's priceless. So take your NDA and your blood money and get out of my father's house. Margaret's face was fury and desperation combined. You'll regret this. Harrison has the best lawyers. He'll get custody, he'll get everything. He can try, but I have the evidence. I have the witness statements. I have 300 people who watched his mistress set me on fire. And I have this conversation recorded on my phone in my pocket. One-party consent in New York. Legal and admissible. The color drained from Margaret's face. You're recording this? Every word, including your attempt to bribe me into silence, including your knowledge of Harrison's financial movements, including your admission that reputation mattered more than safety. Margaret's attorney grabbed her arm. We're leaving. Now, don't say another word. They left in a flurry of expensive perfume and barely contained rage. When the door closed behind them, Victoria's knees buckled. Sophie caught her, helped her back to the couch. That was incredible, Sophie breathed. You destroyed her. I'm shaking, Victoria said. Her hands trembled against her legs. I've never stood up to her like that. You should have been doing it for years, Richard said. His voice was full of pride and anger. That woman has been undermining you since the day you married Harrison. Thornton was already emailing the recording to himself, backing it up, adding it to the evidence file. This is good, he said. Very good. Margaret's attorney will be furious. They'll claim entrapment or coercion, but it won't work. You simply met with them at their request and recorded the conversation. All legal. Victoria's phone buzzed. Detective Walsh calling. She answered on speaker. Mrs. Sterling, Walsh said. Her voice was tight with controlled excitement. I need you to come to the station. Amber Caldwell's attorney reached out. She wants to make a deal, and she has recordings. She kept recordings of everything. The room went silent. Recordings of what? Victoria asked. Conversations with Harrison Sterling, planning the incident at the gala, discussing the payment, talking about the life insurance policy. Victoria's blood went cold. Life insurance policy? Harrison increased your life insurance to $5 million 3 months ago. Changed the beneficiary from your father to himself. You didn't know? Victoria looked at her father, at Sophie, at Thornton. All of them looked as shocked as she felt. No, she whispered. I didn't know. Can you come to the station? We need your official statement. And Amber wants to testify against Harrison in exchange for a reduced sentence. But she'll only do it if you agree to hear what she has to say. Victoria touched her belly. The baby kicked. Strong, healthy, alive. I'll be there in an hour, she said. The drive to the police station was silent. Richard drove. Sophie held Victoria's hand. Thornton reviewed documents on his iPad in the front seat. Victoria's mind raced. Life insurance, $5 million. Beneficiary changed to Harrison. He wanted her dead. The thoughts circled and circled. Her husband, the father of her child, had wanted her dead. At the police station, Detective Walsh met them at the door. She led them to a conference room. Amber Caldwell was already there with her public defender. She looked terrible. No makeup, orange jumpsuit, hair pulled back. She looked young, scared. Victoria sat across from her. Sophie on one side, Thornton on the other. Richard stood against the wall. Walsh took a seat at the head of the table. Mrs. Sterling, Walsh began, has agreed to provide testimony against Harrison Sterling in exchange for a plea deal. But before we proceed, she wanted to speak to you directly. Victoria looked at Amber, the woman who'd set her on fire, who tried to kill her and her baby. Why not? Victoria asked. Why should I listen to anything you have to say? Amber's eyes filled with tears. Because he used me, just like he used you. And I was stupid enough to believe him. She pushed a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, text messages, emails, photos. Victoria read with growing horror. Harrison hadn't just had an affair. He'd cultivated Amber deliberately, love-bombed her, made her dependent on him, isolated her from friends and family. Classic abuser tactics. And then he'd told her Victoria was the problem. Cold, unloving, trapped him with pregnancy. Stole his future. He said we'd be together after, Amber said. Her voice broke. After you were gone. He said we'd raise both babies together. That I'd have the life you stole from him, that you were keeping him prisoner with your father's money. Victoria's hands shook as she read. Message after message of Harrison manipulating this young woman, making her hate Victoria, making her feel justified in doing something terrible. Then she reached the worst messages. Harrison, the baby is just leverage. Once I control the inheritance through the kid, I'll get full custody. My mother will help raise it. You and I can disappear with the money. Harrison, Victoria's father won't help if she's just divorced. But if something happens to her, the baby inherits everything. I control the trust until the kid's 18. That's $25 million minimum. Harrison, just make it look impulsive, jealous mistress. You'll get temporary insanity. Serve maybe 5 years. When you get out, we'll have everything waiting. Victoria couldn't breathe. The words swam before her eyes. He'd planned this, planned her death, planned to use their baby as a tool to access her father's money, planned to abandon even their child eventually. He gave me the lighter, Amber whispered. Told me what dress you'd be wearing. Told me where you'd be standing, said to make a scene. Get vodka on you, and then, she sobbed. I thought I was fighting for love. I thought I was saving him from you. But he was just using me. He never loved either of us. Walsh slid another document across the table. Amber recorded some of their conversations. She was smart enough to protect herself. We've verified the recordings are authentic. Harrison Sterling's voice, unmistakable, discussing insurance fraud, discussing murder for hire, discussing conspiracy. Victoria looked at the transcripts, at the proof of her husband's betrayal in black and white. This wasn't a man who fell out of love. This was a man who had planned to kill her for money. What happens now? Victoria asked. Her voice sounded far away. We arrest Harrison Sterling on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, attempted murder by proxy. He's looking at 20 to 30 years. Walsh paused. But we need your statement and your agreement to testify. Victoria looked at Amber. At this young woman who'd also been manipulated and used. Why are you doing this? Victoria asked. Why turn on him now? Amber wiped her eyes. Because I'm pregnant. For real. And I realized that if he could do this to you, to his wife, to the mother of his child, he'd do it to me too, eventually, when I wasn't useful anymore. And I don't want my baby growing up with a monster for a father. Victoria understood. In that moment, across the table from the woman who'd almost killed her, Victoria understood. They were both victims of Harrison Sterling's manipulation. Both women he'd used and discarded. The difference was that Victoria had survived. I'll testify, Victoria said. I'll give my statement. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he never hurts anyone else. Walsh nodded, pulled out fresh paperwork, started the process of building an airtight case against Harrison Sterling. In her pocket, Victoria's phone buzzed. Text message from Margaret. Victoria, please. We can still work this out. Don't do this to your child. Don't take away their father. Victoria typed back quickly. Harrison isn't a father. He's a predator. And I'm protecting our child from him, the way you should have protected me. She blocked Margaret's number. Then she placed both hands on her belly. The baby kicked, strong, determined. It's okay, Victoria whispered. We're safe now, I promise. I'm never letting anyone hurt us again. The conference room felt smaller with each passing minute. Detective Walsh set up audio equipment. A court stenographer appeared to record everything officially. Amber's public defender reviewed documents with tight, focused attention. Victoria sat across from recording equipment that would capture the worst moments of her marriage. Sophie held her hand under the table. Thornton took notes on his iPad. Richard stood sentinel by the door. Are you ready? Walsh asked gently. Victoria nodded. She wasn't ready. Would never be ready. But this had to happen. Walsh pressed play on the first recording. Harrison's voice filled the room. Casual, confident. The voice that had whispered promises on their wedding night. That had told her he loved her. That had discussed baby names just months ago. That same voice now discussing murder. I increased Victoria's life insurance to $5 million. The agent asked a few questions, but I'm her husband and her attorney. They didn't push. Beneficiary is me now instead of Richard. If something happens to her, the baby inherits. I control the trust. Amber's voice responded, younger, eager to please. What if something does happen to her? Then we grieve appropriately, wait a respectful amount of time, get married eventually, raise both kids together, and have access to the Hayes fortune without Richard interfering. But nothing's going to happen to her, right? We're just planning for the future. A pause, then Harrison's voice, colder. Well, accidents happen, especially at crowded events, especially with pregnant women. They're so clumsy, so fragile. Victoria's breath caught. Sophie squeezed her hand harder. Walsh stopped the recording. That was from 2 months ago, after he changed the insurance policy, but before the gala. We have the date stamp verified. Play the next one, Victoria said. Her voice sounded hollow. The second recording was worse. Harrison, the Sterling Foundation Gala is perfect. 300 witnesses, cameras everywhere. If something happens, it'll be very public, very documented. No one can claim it was suspicious. Amber, what's going to happen? Harrison, I don't know yet, but you'll be there, and Victoria will be there, and emotions will be running high. Pregnant women are so emotional, so unstable. If she were to have some kind of accident or confrontation, well, these things happen. Amber, you want me to do something. Harrison, I want you to make a scene. Let everyone see how unstable the situation is, how Victoria is driving everyone crazy with her drama, how you're the victim of her jealousy. Amber, what if she confronts me? Harrison, then defend yourself. Do what you need to do. I'll make sure you're protected. The recording ended. Victoria sat frozen. Her brain couldn't process what she was hearing. This was premeditated, calculated, cold. He planned it, she whispered. He planned all of it. There's more, Walsh said quietly. Do you want to continue? Victoria nodded. She needed to hear it all, needed to understand the depth of his betrayal. The third recording was from 1 week before the gala. Cash withdrawal sounds, rustling. Harrison, 50,000, untraceable. Amber, what's this for? Harrison, your legal defense fund. When this is over, you'll need a good attorney. This will cover it, plus compensation for your trouble. Now, Amber, my trouble? Harrison, for doing what needs to be done at the gala, for making sure everyone sees Victoria's instability, for defending yourself when she attacks you. Amber, she won't attack me. Harrison, she will when you tell her about us. When you tell her about your pregnancy, when you make it public, she'll lose control, and when she does, you protect yourself. By any means necessary. Amber, any means? Harrison, any means. Just make sure it looks spontaneous. Make sure the baby isn't harmed. The baby has to survive. That's the key to everything. Victoria pressed her hands to her mouth. She was going to be sick. The baby kicked frantically inside her, responding to her distress. He told her to hurt me, Victoria said. He gave her money, told her to do whatever was necessary, told her to make sure the baby survived so he could collect the inheritance. Not just told her, paid her, planned it, gave her the weapon. Walsh pulled out an evidence bag. Inside was a silver Zippo lighter. This lighter was purchased by Harrison Sterling 3 days before the gala. Credit card records confirm it. Amber says he gave it to her that same day. Victoria stared at the lighter, the instrument that had almost killed her and her baby. Purchased deliberately, given intentionally. But there's one more recording, Walsh said. This one is from the day of the gala. Afternoon, a few hours before the event. She pressed play. Harrison, remember, you're fighting for us, for our future. Victoria stands between us and everything we deserve. Amber, I'm scared. Harrison, don't be. I'll protect you. Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're taken care of. You're doing this for love. Everyone will understand. Amber, what if I can't do it? What if I freeze? Harrison, you won't. You're strong, you're brave, and you know what needs to happen. Just get the vodka on her. Use the lighter. Make it look impulsive. Everyone will believe it. Jealous mistress? Temporary insanity? You'll serve minimal time, and when you get out, we'll have everything. Amber, promise? Harrison, I promise I love you. This is for us. The recording ended in the sound of kissing, of Amber crying and Harrison comforting her, of a man manipulating a young woman into attempted murder. Victoria couldn't hold it in anymore. She ran to the bathroom attached to the conference room, threw up until there was nothing left, sat on the cold tile floor and sobbed. Sophie came in, sat beside her, held her while she fell apart. He never loved me, Victoria choked out. Never. I was just a resource, a connection to money, a placeholder. And when I wasn't useful anymore, he planned to kill me. I know, Sophie whispered. I know, honey. I'm so sorry. And the baby, our baby. He only wanted the baby to live so he could use it, use our child as a tool to access money. He didn't care about being a father. He cared about inheritance. Sophie's arms tightened around her. Eventually, Victoria got herself under control, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror, saw a woman who'd survived her husband's plan to murder her, a woman who was still standing, still fighting, still protecting her child. She walked back into the conference room, sat down, met Walsh's eyes. I want to press charges, Victoria said. Every charge possible. I want him in prison for the rest of his life. Walsh nodded. We're moving forward with conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder by proxy, insurance fraud, solicitation of murder. He's looking at 25 to 30 years minimum. When will you arrest him? Officers are executing the warrant now. He'll be in custody within the hour. Victoria leaned back in her chair, felt the weight of the last few days crash over her. The gala, the fire, the betrayal, the recordings, all of it. But underneath the trauma, something else was growing, something hard and determined. Quiet strength. She'd survived the worst thing Harrison could do to her. She'd survived the fire. survived hearing the proof of his betrayal, survived knowing he'd planned her death, and she was still here, still standing, still protecting her baby. That made her more powerful than Harrison could ever understand. Victoria insisted on going to the Sterling mansion one last time. She needed to see it, needed to collect the last of her personal belongings, needed to stand in the nursery they had decorated together and mourn what should have been. Richard's security team came with her, Marcus and two others. Sophie stayed close. Thornton waited in the car with legal documents ready in case Harrison tried anything. But Harrison wouldn't be trying anything, because Harrison was in a holding cell downtown, being processed on charges that would put him away for decades. The mansion felt cold, empty, like a museum instead of a home. Had it always been this sterile? Or had Victoria just not noticed? She walked through the foyer, past the formal living room where Margaret had criticized her maternity dress, past the dining room where Harrison had eaten countless silent dinners while texting Amber, past the study where he'd planned her murder, up the stairs to the nursery. Victoria stood in the doorway. The room was pale blue, gender neutral. They decorated it together 3 months ago, picked out the crib, the changing table, the rocking chair. Harrison had smiled and made suggestions, held her hand and talked about the future, all while planning to kill her. Victoria walked to the crib, ran her hand over the smooth wood, touched the mobile they'd chosen together. Little animals, elephants and giraffes and lions. Every choice was tainted now, every memory poisoned. "Are you okay?" Sophie asked from the doorway. "This room will still be a nursery," Victoria said quietly. "Just not here, not in this house, not in this life." She turned away, didn't look back. They packed quickly. Sophie had made a list: clothes, books, photos of Victoria's mother, personal items that belonged to her alone. Nothing else. Nothing tied to Harrison or the Sterling family. "Leave it all," Victoria said. "I don't want anything from this place." In the bedroom she'd shared with Harrison, Victoria opened the closet, found the box of maternity photos from just months ago. Her and Harrison, her belly just starting to show, both of them smiling. She looked happy in those photos. He looked convincing. Victoria ripped the photos in half, let them fall to the floor. Cathartic and necessary. Then she found it, hidden in the back of Harrison's nightstand, a burner phone. "Marcus," she called, "we need to bag this as evidence." Marcus came in, gloved hands took the phone, sealed it in plastic. This would go to Detective Walsh. More evidence, more proof of premeditation. They finished packing. 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. 7 years of marriage reduced to things that would fit in a car. As they left, Victoria paused at the front door, looked back one last time. "I loved you," she said to the empty house, to the ghost of her marriage, to the life that never really existed. "I loved you, and you almost destroyed me." Then she walked out. Marcus locked the door behind them. Victoria would never come back here. That night in her childhood bedroom at her father's estate, Victoria couldn't sleep. The burns ached. The baby kicked. Her mind raced with images from the recordings. At midnight, she got up, walked to the window, looked out at the grounds where she'd played as a child, where her mother had taught her to garden, where her father had pushed her on swings. She was safe here, protected, surrounded by people who actually loved her. But she also felt profoundly alone. The weight of single motherhood loomed. She'd raised this baby without a father. Explain someday why daddy was in prison. Navigate the trauma and the questions and the judgment. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. She almost didn't read it, but something made her look. "Mrs. Sterling, this is Sarah Walsh. Off the record, I wanted you to know that 3 other women have come forward. Harrison has a pattern, other affairs, other manipulation. You're not the first woman he used. You're just the first who survived to tell the truth. These women are grateful you're speaking up. You're giving them courage to come forward too." Victoria read it twice, then a third time. Other women, a pattern. She wasn't alone in this. Harrison Sterling was a serial predator, and she'd stopped him. By surviving, by fighting back, by refusing to stay silent. Victoria touched her belly. "You hear that?" she whispered to her unborn daughter. Your mom is a badass, and you're going to be one too. The baby kicked, strong, determined. Victoria smiled through her tears. The quiet strength was building, growing, becoming something unshakable. She'd survived the worst. Everything from here was just details. 3 months later, Victoria sat in a courtroom holding her newborn daughter, Grace Elizabeth Sterling, born 2 weeks early, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect. The trial had been delayed until after Victoria gave birth. Judge's orders. She'd testified while 8 months pregnant, but the final proceedings waited until she'd recovered. Now Grace slept in her arms, tiny and peaceful, while Victoria watched Harrison Sterling face justice. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows. Society matrons whispered in the gallery. Margaret Sterling sat in the front, her face a mask of practiced grief. Harrison looked haggard. The 3 months in jail had aged him. Gray streaked his hair. His expensive suit couldn't hide the hollowness in his face. He'd refused every plea deal, insisted on trial, convinced his high-priced lawyers could get him acquitted despite overwhelming evidence. They couldn't. The prosecution had spent 3 days presenting evidence. Videos from the Gala showing Amber's attack, hospital records documenting Victoria's injuries, financial records showing the insurance policy and cash withdrawal, phone records proving constant contact between Harrison and Amber, and the recordings, all of them, played in open court for everyone to hear, Harrison's voice filling the courtroom, planning murder, manipulating Amber, reducing his wife and unborn child to dollar signs and leverage. Victoria had testified 2 weeks ago, taken the stand and told her story calmly, clearly, every detail from the Gala, every moment of realizing her husband wanted her dead. The prosecutor had asked, "What went through your mind when you were on fire?" Victoria had looked directly at Harrison. That my baby wouldn't know their mother. That this man I loved, built a life with, was letting me burn. That I had to save us both because no one else would. The jury had been riveted. Several women were crying. During cross-examination, Harrison's defense attorney tried to paint Victoria as vindictive, as a woman scorned seeking revenge through false accusations. Victoria remained calm, answered precisely. Defense attorney, isn't it true you wanted your father's money to stay in the family? Victoria, isn't it true your client tried to murder me to get my father's money? The judge had allowed the response. The jury had barely hidden their approval. Amber testified next. Still pregnant, 6 months along now. She'd pleaded guilty to attempted assault in exchange for a reduced sentence. 7 years with parole possible after 4. She took the stand and admitted everything. The affair, the manipulation, Harrison's plan, the payment, the lighter. He groomed me, dear May, Amber said, her voice shaking. Made me think Victoria was the villain. Made me think we were star-crossed lovers fighting for our future. But I was just a tool, a weapon he pointed at his wife. Harrison's attorney tried to discredit her, called her unstable, accused her of lying to reduce her sentence. But then the prosecution played the recordings. Harrison's voice, unmistakable, planning every detail. The courtroom had gone silent. Even Harrison's lawyers looked defeated. Today was closing arguments, then jury deliberation, then verdict. Victoria sat in the gallery beside her father. Grace nursed under a blanket. Richard kept one hand on Victoria's shoulder. Steady, supportive. Sophie sat on her other side. She'd designed a dress for Victoria, elegant, professional, with hidden nursing access and enough stretch to accommodate her post-pregnancy body. The prosecution stood for closing arguments. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about premeditation. About a man who saw his wife not as a person, but as an obstacle to wealth, who planned her death with the same cold calculation he used in corporate contracts, who manipulated a young woman into becoming a weapon, who valued money over life, over love, over the child he claimed to want. The prosecutor walked the jury through the evidence again, methodically, thoroughly. Then she played one final recording, the one that had never been released to media, the one saved for trial. Harrison's voice. The baby is just leverage. Once I control the inheritance, I'll get full custody. My mother will raise the child. You and I can disappear with the money. We don't need either of them. Not Victoria, not the baby, just the money. Grace stirred in Victoria's arms, made a tiny sound. Victoria held her closer. That baby is here today, the prosecutor said, gesturing to Victoria. Grace Sterling, 3 months old, the child her father valued only as a tool to access wealth. The child he planned to abandon once he'd used her for inheritance. Several jurors looked at Victoria, at Grace. Their expressions said everything. Don't let him get away with this, the prosecutor finished. Don't let him reduce Victoria's life, Grace's existence, to nothing more than a failed business transaction. Hold him accountable. Find him guilty on all counts. She sat down. Harrison's defense attorney stood for his closing, tried to create reasonable doubt, suggested the recordings were taken out of context, that Harrison's words were hypothetical, that he never intended actual harm. It was weak. Everyone knew it. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Victoria waited in a private room, nursing Grace, fielding text messages of support, trying not to think about what would happen if Harrison was acquitted. But deep down, she knew. The evidence was overwhelming. Harrison Sterling had planned to murder his wife for money. The jury would see that. They had to. At 4 in the afternoon, the jury returned. Everyone filed back into the courtroom. Victoria held Grace close. The baby was awake now, dark eyes looking around with infant curiosity. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. How do you find? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder by proxy? Guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud? Guilty. On the charge of solicitation of murder? Guilty. The courtroom erupted, cheers, applause. The judge's gavel couldn't restore order for a full minute. Harrison's face crumbled. For the first time, Victoria saw real emotion. Fear, horror, the realization that his life was over. Margaret Sterling wept, loud dramatic sobs, but whether she was crying for her son or her family's ruined reputation, Victoria couldn't tell. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Victoria walked out of the courtroom with her head high, Grace in her arms. Her father on one side, Sophie on the other. Media shouted questions, cameras flashed, but she ignored them all until she reached the courthouse steps. Then she turned, looked at the cameras, made a statement she'd prepared with Thornton's approval. 3 months ago, my husband tried to have me murdered for my father's money. He manipulated a young woman into setting me on fire while I was 7 months pregnant. I survived. My daughter survived. Today, justice was served. She paused, looked directly into the cameras. To anyone experiencing domestic abuse, financial abuse, emotional manipulation, you're not crazy. You're not imagining it. You're not overreacting. Trust your instincts. Speak your truth. Survive, because survival is the first step to justice. Grace chose that moment to coo. The sound was picked up by every microphone. Perfect timing. Victoria smiled, kissed her daughter's head, and walked away from the courthouse feeling lighter than she had in months. Sentencing that came 2 weeks later, 25 years in prison, eligible for parole in 15. Harrison Sterling, age 35, would be 50 at his earliest possible release. His legal career was over, his reputation destroyed, his family name irrevocably tarnished. Margaret Sterling tried to approach Victoria after sentencing. Her face was haggard, broken. I'm sorry, Margaret said. I taught him the world owed him everything. I taught him that power mattered more than people. I destroyed my son trying to protect him. Victoria looked at the woman who'd criticized her for 7 years, who'd cared more about reputation than safety, who'd enabled her son's worst impulses. He destroyed himself, Victoria said, not unkindly, just truthfully. But thank you for the apology. For what it's worth, I wish things had been different. She meant it. She wished Harrison had been the man he pretended to be, that her marriage had been real, that Grace would grow up with a father instead of visiting him in prison, supervised by guards. But wishing couldn't change reality. Only action could do that. As Victoria left the courthouse for the final time, Margaret called after her. What about Grace? She's still my grandchild. Can I see her? Please. Victoria turned back, considered. Grace deserved to know her family history, both the good and the bad, but on Victoria's terms, when Grace was old enough to understand. Not now, Victoria said, but someday, when Grace is older, when she can decide for herself if she wants a relationship with you. But it will be her choice, not yours, not mine, hers. Margaret nodded, tears streaming. It was more than she deserved, but Victoria was building a life based on grace and boundaries, not revenge and bitterness. She walked away, Grace against her chest, the future ahead of her. 6 weeks after sentencing, Victoria stood in the Hayes Grand Ballroom, the place where she'd almost died, where her dress had caught fire, where her old life had burned away. It looked different now. The damage had been repaired, the marble floors gleamed, new chandeliers sparkled, but the space felt transformed, not by renovation, by purpose. Tonight was the first event since the Gala, a charity fundraiser for domestic violence survivors. 200 guests, all proceeds going to women's shelters and legal aid funds. Victoria had been asked to host, to give the keynote speech. She'd agreed without hesitation. She wore a dress Sophie designed specifically for this night, royal blue, professional, beautiful. The sleeves covered the scars on her arms but didn't hide them. The neckline was modest but elegant. The dress whispered strength and survival. Grace was home with a nanny, 3 months old, too young for an event like this. But Victoria had photos on her phone. Her daughter's face was her touchstone, her reminder of why she'd survived. "You ready?" Sophie asked. She stood beside Victoria backstage, adjusted her friend's dress, checked her makeup, provided the support she always had. "I'm ready," Victoria said. Richard appeared, handsome in his tux, proud beyond words. "The guests are seated," he said. "The press is here. Everyone's waiting for you." Victoria took a breath, touched the spot on the floor where she'd burned, where Marcus had tackled her, where the fire had been extinguished. "This place tried to kill me," she said quietly. "Now it's going to help save others." She walked on stage. The crowd rose, standing ovation before she'd even spoken. 200 people recognizing survival, celebrating strength. Victoria stood at the podium, looked out at faces she knew and faces she didn't, saw society matrons who'd supported her, saw women who'd come forward about Harrison, saw survivors of different battles recognizing a sister. She began to speak. "3 months ago, I stood in this room wearing an ivory gown and carrying my unborn daughter. I thought I was attending a charity gala. I didn't know I was fighting for my life." The room was silent, attentive, respectful. Victoria told her story, not all of it. The details were too raw, too personal, but enough to connect, enough to inspire, enough to matter. She talked about the warning signs she'd ignored, the gaslighting, the isolation, the way Harrison had made her doubt her instincts, made her apologize for taking up space, made her small. "I spent 7 years making myself invisible," Victoria said, "shrinking to fit someone else's vision of who I should be, and it almost killed me." She paused, looked at the exact spot where Amber had thrown vodka on her, where the lighter had flicked, where the flames had consumed her dress. "But I survived. My daughter survived. And now I'm standing here in this place that almost became my grave to tell you, trust your instincts. Speak your truth. Leave before it's too late. Because you deserve better than someone who makes you doubt your worth." The applause was deafening. Victoria continued, talked about the investigation, the trial, the justice system that had worked for her but didn't always work for everyone. "I was lucky," she said. "I had resources, a father with money and power, an excellent attorney, evidence that was undeniable. But so many women don't have those advantages. They're trapped by finances, by fear, by systems that don't believe them or protect them." She gestured to the room. "The ballroom her father owned. That's why we're here tonight, to raise money for women who need help leaving, who need legal representation, who need safe places to stay, who need to know they're not alone." The crowd nodded. Several women were crying. Victoria's voice strengthened. "They tried to burn me down. My husband, his mistress, the people who were supposed to protect me. They tried to reduce me to ashes, but I'm still here. Stronger, wiser, free. She paused for effect, for emphasis, for truth. They tried to burn me down. Instead, they set me free. The ballroom exploded with applause. People stood, cheered, some wept openly. Victoria stood at the podium, Grace's photo on the screen behind her, and felt the transformation complete itself. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor, an advocate, a mother, a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged refined instead of destroyed. After the speech, Victoria mingled with guests, accepted congratulations, thanked donors, spoke with other survivors who approached tentatively, hopefully. One woman was particularly memorable. Mid-40s, expensive jewelry, society polish. She approached Victoria with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've been making excuses for my husband's behavior for 8 years, telling myself I'm imagining things, that I'm too sensitive, but hearing you tonight, I'm not crazy, am I?" Victoria took her hands. "No, you're not crazy. You're not imagining it, and you deserve better." The woman nodded, pulled out a card. "This is my attorney's number. If you need help, if you need someone to believe you, call me." The woman clutched the card like a lifeline. Thank you so much." Victoria watched her walk away, hoped she'd call, hoped she'd leave before it was too late. Later, as the event wound down, Victoria stood alone in the ballroom. The guests had left. The cleanup crew was working quietly. The chandeliers dimmed. She walked to the exact spot, the place where she'd burned, where everything changed. Richard found her there. "You did good tonight, sweetheart," he said. "Your mother would be so proud." "I hope so. I hope I'm teaching Grace what real strength looks like." "Well, you are. Every day." Richard put his arm around her shoulders. "Those other women who came forward about Harrison, they found courage because you showed them courage exists. You're making a difference." Victoria leaned against her father, tired, satisfied, at peace. "This place will always be part of my story," she said, "but it doesn't define me. I do." "That's right, and you're just getting started." 1 week later, Victoria returned to work, not to the art gallery where she'd been a curator before marriage, to something bigger, better, more fitting. Director of the Hayes Foundation, a new charitable organization her father had created with Victoria as the face and leader, focused on helping domestic violence survivors, providing legal aid, funding shelters, offering job training and financial independence programs. Victoria's first day back was part-time. Grace came with her. The foundation offices had a nursery, childcare for staff and clients. Because mothers shouldn't have to choose between safety and caring for their children. Sophie visited at lunch, brought food from Victoria's favorite restaurant. They ate in Victoria's new office overlooking Central Park. "How does it feel?" Sophie asked. "Being back in the working world?" "Terrifying, exhilarating, right?" Victoria bounced Grace on her knee. "I spent 7 years letting Harrison make me think I needed him, that I couldn't succeed on my own, that being a mother meant giving up career dreams. And now? Now I know better. I can have everything. Career, baby, independence. I just had to stop letting someone else define my limitations." Sophie raised her coffee cup. "To Victoria Hayes Sterling, survivor, mother, badass." Victoria clinked her water bottle against it. "To Sophie Bennett, best friend, truth teller, and designer of dresses that make women feel powerful." They laughed, ate, talked about plans for the foundation, about Grace's developmental milestones, about everything except Harrison and the trial and the fire. That chapter was closed. Sealed, finished. This was the beginning of something new. 6 months after the trial, Victoria received an envelope in the mail. Return address, Margaret Sterling. Inside was a check for $2 million and a note. "For Grace, I have no right to meet her or be part of her life, but she deserves better than what my son provided. Please use this however you see fit, for her education, for her future, for your foundation. Whatever helps make the world better for women like you. I'm sorry I failed you. I'm sorry I raised a monster. I'm trying to do better now." Margaret, Victoria stared at the check, at the note, at this offering from a woman who'd been her enemy, but was also a grandmother grieving the loss of her son. She didn't cash it immediately, put it in a folder, filed it away. Maybe for Grace's college fund, she told Sophie. Maybe I donate it to the foundation. I'll decide when I'm ready. That's growth, Sophie said. Old Victoria would have sent it back immediately or cashed it out of spite. New Victoria recognizes that Margaret is trying, that people can change, that holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts her. Victoria wasn't ready to have a relationship with Margaret. Maybe she never would be, but she could accept the gesture, could acknowledge the apology, could leave space for Grace to decide someday if she wanted to know her paternal grandmother. That was Grace, real Grace. Not the naive trust she'd given Harrison, but the wise compassion that came from surviving and choosing not to become bitter. On Grace's first birthday, Victoria threw a party at Richard's estate. Small, intimate, only people who'd supported them through everything. Sophie and her new boyfriend, Richard and his staff, Dr. Helen Richardson and her partner, Detective Sarah Walsh and her wife, James Thornton and his husband, Marcus and his family. The people who'd become Victoria's chosen family, who'd stood by her, who'd helped her survive and rebuild. Grace smashed her face into a cake Sophie had designed, pink frosting everywhere, tiny fists grabbing, pure joy and chaos. Victoria watched her daughter and felt overwhelming gratitude. This beautiful, healthy, happy child, who'd survived fire and trauma in the womb, who was loved and safe and protected. "What are you thinking about?" Richard asked. He sat beside her, watching his granddaughter create frosting disasters. "That I almost didn't get this. That if Harrison's plan had worked, Grace would have grown up without me. That I survived for her." "No," Richard said gently. "You survived for you. Grace is the gift, but you're the hero of your own story." Victoria considered that. She'd spent so long seeing herself through other people's eyes. Harrison's, Margaret's, society's, always asking if she was enough, if she was doing it right, if she deserved happiness. Now she knew the answer. Yes, she was enough. She was doing it right. She deserved everything. "You're right," Victoria said. "I survived because I fought back, because I chose life, because I decided I was worth saving." "Damn right you are." Grace toddled over, frosting in her hair, chocolate on her face, squealing with delight. Victoria scooped her up, kissed her messy face, didn't care about the stains on her dress. "Happy birthday, baby girl," she whispered. "You're my greatest adventure." Grace babbled something incomprehensible, patted Victoria's face with sticky hands, smiled with pure love, and Victoria knew, absolutely knew, that she'd made the right choice, fighting back, surviving, refusing to stay silent, building this new life. 2 years after the trial, Victoria stood in the Hayes Grand Ballroom for the third annual Survivors Gala. The event had grown exponentially. 500 guests this year, national media attention, corporate sponsors, politicians, celebrities. The ballroom could barely contain the momentum. Grace was 3 years old now, home with a nanny, but old enough to understand that mommy helped people, that the foundation mommy ran was important, that sometimes bad things happened, but good people made it better. Victoria had told Grace an age-appropriate version of her story about a scary night when mommy got hurt, about how mommy was very brave, about how daddy made bad choices and had to go away. Grace accepted it with 3-year-old logic. "Daddy's in timeout?" "Yes, baby, a very long timeout." "Because he was bad to you?" "Yes." Grace had hugged her fiercely. "I protect you, mommy." Victoria's heart had broken and healed simultaneously. "We protect each other." Now standing backstage at the gala, Victoria reviewed her speech notes. But she didn't need them. These words came from her soul. Sophie adjusted Victoria's dress. Another masterpiece. Emerald green this time. Elegant, powerful. The dress of a woman who'd conquered demons and emerged victorious. "You ready?" Sophie asked. "Always." Victoria walked on stage. The crowd rose instantly. Standing ovation, recognition, respect, love. She waited for silence. Let the moment settle. then began. 3 years ago, I stood in this room and almost died. Tonight, I stand here having helped 500 women escape dangerous situations, having provided legal representation to 300 survivors, having opened 4 new shelters, having trained 2,000 volunteers in recognizing domestic violence warning signs. The crowd applause. Applause filled the space where she'd once screamed in agony. I spent months asking myself what I did wrong, what I could have changed. Then I realized, you can't love someone into being good. You can't sacrifice enough to make someone value you. All you can control is how you respond when they show you who they are. Victoria paused, looked at the faces watching her, saw her journey reflected in their eyes. I almost didn't survive learning that lesson. But I did survive. In survival, that's everything. More applause, longer, louder. Victoria continued, talked about the foundation's work, the women they'd helped, the lives saved, the futures reclaimed. Then she shifted tone, got personal. People ask me if I'm angry, if I'm bitter, if I hate Harrison Sterling for what he did. She paused. I don't. Anger takes energy I'd rather spend on building than destroying. Bitterness poisons the person holding it more than the target. And hate? Hate would make me like him. She let that sink in. Instead, I choose grace. Not naive trust, not blind forgiveness, but wise compassion. I choose to believe people can change. That mothers like Margaret Sterling can recognize their failures and try to do better. That young women like Amber Caldwell can serve their time and build new lives. That my daughter can grow up knowing her father's mistakes don't define her. Victoria's voice strengthened. And I choose power, not the power that controls others, but the power that comes from controlling yourself, your narrative, your future, your worth. The ballroom was silent, reverent, hanging on every word. The night I burned, I was stripped of everything. My marriage, my identity as a wife, my naive belief that love conquers all, my safety, my dignity, almost my life. Victoria touched her arms where scars still marked her skin. But from those ashes, something stronger emerged. Not who I was always meant to be. She gestured to the ballroom, to the venue that had almost become her grave but had instead become her cathedral. This place tried to kill me, now it saves lives. That's transformation. That's the power we all have, to take the worst things that happen to us and transmute them into purpose. The applause started, built, became thunderous. Victoria held up her hand, waited for quiet. One more thing to say, the most important thing. To everyone watching who's in a dangerous situation, you're not imagining it. You're not overreacting. You're not responsible for someone else's choices. You deserve safety. You deserve respect. You deserve life. And if you need help, we're here. The Hayes Foundation. Hundreds of organizations like ours. We believe you. We'll help you. You don't have to survive alone. She ended with the phrase that had become her motto, her mantra, her truth. They tried to burn me down. Instead, they set me free. And I'm using that freedom to help set others free too. The ballroom erupted, 500 people standing, cheering, some crying, some laughing. All of them moved. Victoria stood at the podium, Grace's latest photo on the screen behind her, and felt complete, whole, transformed. After the gala, after the guests left, after the final interviews and the last handshake, Victoria stood alone in the ballroom, just like she'd done 2 years ago, just like she'd done countless times since. But tonight felt different, final, full circle. She walked to the spot, the exact marble tile where she'd burned, where the vodka had ignited, where her old life had ended. She knelt down, touched the floor. It was cool and smooth, no trace of fire, no evidence of trauma, just beautiful marble in a beautiful room. Thank you, Victoria whispered, for showing me who I really was, for burning away everything false, for teaching me that I could survive anything. She stood, brushed off her dress, turned to leave. Richard was waiting by the door. He'd stayed through everything, patient, supportive, proud. Ready to go home? He asked. Yeah, Grace is probably driving the nanny crazy. They walked out together, father and daughter, past the spot where she'd almost died, through the ballroom that had witnessed her destruction and her rebirth. Outside, the Manhattan skyline sparkled, the city where she'd been born, where she'd fallen in love, where she'd survived, where she'd built a new life from ashes. Victoria's phone buzzes, text from Sophie. Amazing speech tonight. I'm so proud of you. Grace is lucky to have you as her mom. Victoria typed back quickly. I'm lucky to have her, and you, and everyone who helped me survive. Another text came in, this one from Detective Walsh. Saw your speech on the news. You're inspiring a generation. Keep fighting the good fight. Then James Thornton. Excellent gala. The foundation's work is changing lives. You should be very proud. Then Dr. Richardson. Just watched your speech with my daughter. She asked if she could volunteer when she's older. You're making a real difference, Victoria. Message after message. Support, love, recognition. Victoria felt overwhelmed, grateful. Powerful in a way she'd never felt with Harrison. Because this power came from within, from survival, from choice. They reached Richard's car. Marcus held the door open, smiled at Victoria with genuine warmth. Proud of you, Mrs. Sterling, he said. You've come a long way from that night. We all have, Victoria said. Thank you for saving my life. You saved your own life. I just put out the fire. Victoria hugged him, surprised him and herself, but it felt right. He'd been there at the worst moment. He deserved to see her triumph. The drive to Richard's estate was quiet, peaceful. Victoria watched the city pass by, thought about everything that had happened, everything she'd survived, everything she'd built. At home, she found Grace asleep in her room. The nanny reported an evening of chaos and sugar, in pure toddler joy. Victoria stood by her daughter's bed, watched her sleep, counted blessings instead of wounds. Grace had her father's dark hair, but Victoria's features. She'd have questions someday about Harrison, about why Daddy was gone, about the scars on Mommy's arms. Victoria would answer honestly, age appropriately, but honestly, because Grace deserved truth, deserved to know that her mother survived, that survival was possible, that women were strong enough to fight back and win. Your story starts clean, Victoria whispered to her sleeping daughter. No darkness except what I choose to share as lessons. No shame except what others try to put on you. No limits except the ones you accept. She kissed Grace's forehead, tucked the blanket tighter. And I promise you'll always know you're loved, valued, and safe. That's the difference between your father and me. I choose love every single time. 3 years after the trial, Victoria did something she'd been avoiding. She visited Harrison in prison. Not because she forgave him, not because she wanted closure, but because Grace was getting older, starting to ask questions. And Victoria wanted to see him one more time, to confirm what she already knew, that she'd made the right choice, that leaving was survival, that he was exactly who she thought he was. The visitation room was gray, cold, institutional. Nothing like the luxury Harrison had known his whole life. He looked older, prison-aged people fast, gray hair, hollow cheeks, hands that had once signed corporate contracts now folded on a metal table. Victoria sat across from him. A guard stood nearby. She'd insisted on maximum security protocols. No physical contact, no privacy. Harrison stared at her, then his eyes filled with tears. Victoria, he said. His voice was rough. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't. How's Grace? I saw photos in the news. She's beautiful. She is, and she's happy and safe. Can I see her? Please, I'm her father. I have rights. No, Victoria said firmly. You have no rights. You gave them up when you planned to kill me. When you reduced her to leverage for inheritance. When you told Amber you'd abandon her once you had the money. Harrison flinched. I was a different person then. Prison changes you. I've had time to think, to realize what I lost, what I threw away. Victoria studied him, looking for genuine remorse, for real change. She saw manipulation, practiced regret, the same mask he'd worn throughout their marriage. Just updated for a prison setting. You haven't changed, Victoria said. You're just repackaging the same lies. That's not fair. I've spent 3 years in here. 3 years thinking about what I did, about how I hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry you're in prison. Sorry your plan didn't work. But you're not sorry you tried to kill me because you still don't see me as a person, just an obstacle you failed to remove. Harrison's face hardened. There. That was the real emotion. Anger, frustration, the mask slipping. I loved you, he said. In my own way, I did love you. No, Victoria said. You loved what I represented, my father's money, my social connections, the respectability I provided. But you never loved me, and I'm okay with that now, because I love myself enough for both of us. She stood. This visit had given her exactly what she needed. Confirmation, closure, certainty. Goodbye, Harrison. I won't be coming back. Grace won't be visiting. You'll serve your 15 to 25 years, and when you get out, we'll be long gone, living full, happy lives without you. Victoria, please, don't do this. Don't take my daughter from me. I'm not taking her from you. You threw her away when you tried to use her as leverage, when you said you'd let your mother raise her while you disappeared with Amber and the money. You made your choice. Now live with it. She walked toward the door. Harrison called after her. You'll regret this. Grace will hate you for keeping her from her father. She'll grow up damaged because you took away half her identity. Victoria turned back, smiled, a real smile, full of peace and certainty. Grace will grow up knowing her mother fought for her, protected her, chose her over everything else. That's not damage. That's love. She left, walked out of the prison, into sunshine and fresh air and freedom. Marcus was waiting by the car. How are you feeling? Good, Victoria said, and meant it. Really good, like a chapter just closed. Which chapter is next? Victoria thought about the Foundation's expansion plans, about Grace starting preschool, about the book deal she'd just signed to tell her story, about Sophie's wedding next month where Victoria would be maid of honor, about her father's health scare that had turned out to be nothing serious, but had reminded her that time was precious, about all the beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary moments that made up a life reclaimed. The rest of my story, Victoria said, and it's going to be amazing. 5 years after the fire, on the anniversary of that night, Victoria returned to the Hayes Grand Ballroom one last time. Not for a gala, not for a speech, just for herself. Grace was with Richard. Sophie was traveling for work. Victoria was alone, as she'd needed to be. She walked through the empty ballroom, remembered the night 5 years ago, the ivory gown, the vodka, the flames, the screams, the terror. Then she remembered everything after, the survival, the fight, the justice, the transformation. She stood on the exact spot, the marble tile that had marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. And she said goodbye, not to the trauma. She'd carry those scars forever, physical and emotional, but to the identity of victim, to the shame she'd felt, to the question of why it happened to her. It happened, Victoria said to the empty room, and I survived. And I built something beautiful from the ashes. That's enough. That's everything. She pulled out her phone, took a photo of the spot, posted it to the Foundation's social media with a caption. 5 years ago today, I almost died here. Tonight, I stand here free, whole, powerful. They tried to burn me down. Instead, they set me free. Happy anniversary to me, to survival, to transformation, to choosing life over fear every single day. Victoria, the post went viral within hours. Thousands of shares, millions of views, comments from survivors around the world sharing their own stories, their own transformations, their own triumphs. Victoria read them late into the night, each one a reminder that her story mattered, that speaking truth gave others permission to speak theirs, that survival created ripples that reached further than she'd ever imagined. Grace wandered into her room around midnight, rubbing sleepy eyes, dragging her favorite stuffed elephant. Mommy, can't sleep. Victoria scooped her up, settled her in bed, Grace's warm little body against hers, the smell of baby shampoo and innocence. Me neither, baby girl. Why not? Just thinking about how lucky I am to have you, to have our life, to have survived everything that tried to stop us. Grace looked up at her with those wise 5-year-old eyes. You're the strongest mommy ever. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You're the strongest daughter ever. We're strong together? Yes, baby. We're strong together. Grace fell asleep minutes later, snoring softly, completely secure in her mother's love. Victoria stayed awake, holding her daughter, thinking about the journey from that burning dress to this peaceful moment. She'd been broken, then she'd healed. Not by forgetting, not by pretending it didn't happen, but by walking through the fire and emerging transformed. That was the secret nobody told you. Transformation hurt, required sacrifice, demanded courage. But on the other side, freedom, power, peace. Victoria kissed Grace's head, whispered promises into her hair. I'll teach you to be strong but kind, powerful but compassionate, fierce but graceful. Everything they tried to burn out of me, everything I reclaimed, everything you deserve to know. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Victoria watched the sunrise through her window. Grace asleep in her arms, a new day beginning. And Victoria knew, absolutely knew, that she'd made it, not just survived, but thrived, built something better than what had been destroyed, become someone stronger than who she'd been. The fire had tried to consume her. Instead, it had refined her, burned away everything false and left only truth. Victoria Hayes Sterling, 35 years old, mother, advocate, survivor, warrior, no longer invisible, no longer apologizing, no longer afraid, just powerful, transformed, free. They tried to burn her down. Instead, they set her free. And she was just getting started. Victoria's story reminds us that survival is possible, that speaking truth matters, that we're stronger than we know. If this story moved you, resonated with you, or made you think differently about strength and survival, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories of courage, transformation, and justice, subscribe so you never miss one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, they can try to burn you down, but you get to decide if you rise from the ashes. Until next time.